Well, hello everyone, it's good to be here. So my name's Olivia Bretherick and I work for the Office for Low Emission Vehicles. So I'm just going to do a bit of an overview or quick whistle-stop tour of all the different things that we're doing in government to support the decarbonisation of transport. Oh. Okay, how do I click onto
it? Should, if you click the green one. Right, so Paul is frantically working on it. Whilst we do that, if there are people who are standing, there are some seats at the front here. If you would like to come and take a seat, you're more than welcome. Don't feel that you're interrupting things. It's going to be a long morning otherwise.
Will do. It's not.
Can you dance? Can you juggle?
Try to think of other things that I can do. Well, I can just start talking through it. Fine. So just to give a bit of a context for what OLEV does, so Office for Low Emission Vehicles is a kind of joint unit between Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and Department for Transport. So obviously decarbonisation of transport is a kind of multifaceted transition, so we're combining both energy and transport, so it's important that kind of both departments work together. So we've got our kind of overall main mission, which Theresa May set out last year, which is for almost all new cars and vans to be effectively zero emission by 2040. So to reach that ambition, I think we've got it up. Great.
Apologies for that.
That's okay. There we go. So this is just a bit of an overview of all the kind of different teams in OLEV. So I work in the energy and infrastructure team. So that's obviously kind of providing support into the rollout of charging infrastructure, but also kind of trying to help reduce the impact that electric vehicles might have on the grid. We've also got a team looking into hydrogen, our communications team, which is kind of running our Go Ultra Low campaign, local delivery, so they're looking at taxis and buses and kind of working with local authorities. Our incentive team, who are looking at the kind of grant schemes that we have for the plug-in car grant, for example, and our research and development team, which is kind of doing innovation projects like the project that's we talk about today that Bishop Auckland won. So this is our mission for all new cars and vans to be effectively zero emission by 2040. So this was set out last year, but since then we've now legalised net zero by 2050. So it's kind of put greater importance that we meet this ambition, as well as trying to improve air quality in our cities. So this is, we set out, published our Road to Zero strategy last year. So this kind of sets out how we're going to meet this ambition. So what are it's basically a comprehensive package of measures along with £1.5 billion worth of funding to kind of set out what are how we're going to support this transition, which we expect to be kind of industry and consumer led, but with the right kind of policy environment. So this is what we set out in our Road to Zero strategy. So we expect 50 to 70% of new car sales to be ultra low emission by 2030. So as of 2018, it was 2.6%. So we've obviously got a long way to go, but we expect this to kind of rapidly ramp up over the next 10 years or so. We're already seeing consumer interest increase dramatically over the last year or so. And as kind of battery prices fall and consumer interest carries on increasing, we expect kind of the take up of electric vehicles to kind of keep going. So we expect that price parity is kind of reach with petrol cars, maybe mid-20s, but there's quite a lot of reports out there and some say it'll be earlier than that. Kind of we see price as quite a key barrier to people buying an electric car. But I guess the other key barrier is a lack of confidence in kind of charging infrastructure. So we need to make sure there's enough kind of infrastructure out there to kind of reduce that kind of range anxiety that people feel when they think about buying an electric car. This is just a kind of bit of a plug on kind of what the progress we've had so far. So I said 2.6% market share last year, but as of August this year, it's gone up to 4.4%. So we're kind of seeing a kind of gradual increase. And we've also got, actually those figures are a bit out of date, we've got 22,500 public charge points at the moment, and 2,500 now, of which are rapid. So it's actually a very comprehensive network of charging infrastructure. And a kind of key part of what we want to do is try and educate people to know that there is charging infrastructure out there, and actually there is enough for the number of charge points, the number of cars there are at the moment. But we do have a long way to go if we want to kind of increase that take up. We've also supported about over 100,000 domestic charge points, as we see majority of people with off-street parking are going to charge at home, and that will kind of suit majority of their charging needs. So one of our kind of main ambitions is to support one of the best infrastructure networks in the world, which is quite vague. But what we mean by best is we want it to be the kind of charging infrastructure network to be accessible, we want it to be affordable, reliable, and secure. So we want to kind of create the right policy environment for kind of the industry to kind of deliver that infrastructure network. We see it as many more charge points are needed, both at home, but also kind of at workplace and public spaces. And we also think the kind of the consumer experience of using charge points needs to be improved as well. So these are just a few things that we're doing. So we've recently consulted on all domestic charge points to be smart. So by smart, we mean the ability to kind of the charge points to shift demand. So away from that kind of peak, which is already there, electricity peak between kind of 5 and 8 in the evening, and shift that to overnight. So therefore, that kind of reduces the impact on the grid, the impact and the cost of kind of network reinforcements that are needed, and will actually benefit the grid. So we'll kind of use that kind of underutilized generation that happens overnight and kind of slow charge, which I think is really integral to make sure that kind of electric vehicles are kind of integrated into the system in an affordable way. It's also cheaper for consumers if they kind of make the most of kind of off-peak tariffs as well. We've also recently consulted on amending building regulations, so every new home to have a charge point where there's appropriate parking. So this is both for residential and non-residential, which is actually a world first, and I think will be really important to make sure that there's a kind of enough charge points for people. On the public space, so we've got we recently announced a charging infrastructure investment fund, which is a kind of £200 million match funding, 200 million from government, 200 million from industry, and this is to kind of support the rollout of public charge points. So this is kind of managed like as an arm's length by government and will be kind of invested on a commercial basis, but we think this will kind of help accelerate that rollout. We've also got a project called Project Rapid, which is what I work on, and this was announced a couple of months ago, and we're kind of doing a bit of a review into kind of rapid charge points along motorways and major A roads to try and understand what's out there at the moment and what will be needed in the future, with the idea of kind of setting out a vision for how many charge points we think is needed. As I said, kind of a lot of people range anxiety, or that kind of perceived range anxiety of not being able to make that once or twice a year long journey and being able to be stuck on a motorway is kind of a key factor that's deterring people from buying an electric car. So we want to make sure that that kind of infrastructure is out there. And we have powers under the Automated and Electric Vehicles Act, which allows us to mandate a number of charge points at service stations or at fuel stations. So if we think the industry isn't delivering as we expect, then we can kind of intervene. We've also, as part of these powers, we can mandate that charge points have contactless payments, or kind of ability to have kind of common access methods. And that's a lot of we see a lot of complaints, people saying they have to download loads of apps and it's really complicated and there's different apps for loads of different charge points. So we've set out a kind of expectation for next year, so for all charge points to have a kind of credit or debit card payments, which I think is really important as well. So as well as having infrastructure out there, there needs to be a good consumer experience. We can also intervene if we think that, because reliability, we also kind of need to make sure that there's a kind of, they're up at least 99% of the time. So we can also intervene if we think that kind of the infrastructure isn't as reliable as we expect. This is just a bit of kind of our targeted support towards infrastructure. So we provide £500 off towards your home charge point. For those, so about a third of the country don't have off-street parking, so we need to make sure there's solutions there for people who don't. So we've got, we provide funding, so £7,500 towards on-street charging infrastructure, and that's provided towards local authorities. We've also got money towards kind of workplace charging schemes, so that's also quite important. So then even if people don't have off-street parking, if they can drive to work and charge throughout the day, then that will kind of help. And we've also got some funding towards making sure there's a rapid charge point, which Highways England are leading on. So a rapid charge point every 20 miles along the strategic road network. So we've got a lot of work going on the infrastructure space. Just to give a kind of quick overview of kind of our grant side. So this is the kind of other side of it. So trying to increase the supply is the kind of chicken and egg scenario of there's not going to be the infrastructure if their supply isn't there. So we've got £3,500 off the cars, so this is only for battery electric vehicles only. These cars are exempt from road tax. We've also got, I don't know if people have seen, but we announced, I think, last week, and it got quite a lot of press, our green number plates consultation. So zero emission or ultra low emission cars will have a kind of green number plate, and the idea is that will kind of normalise and kind of raise awareness of electric cars, which we think will be quite good progress, and that will kind of help local authorities towards kind of local incentives such as free parking as well. We've also got our Go Ultra Low campaign, which we've also recently, we've now got an advertisement out on that, and the idea is to kind of change it from the electric car to just the car, and that's just kind of to try and make it more of a normal experience rather than kind of a new kind of fancy technology that people are a bit worried about kind of buying. And the idea is to kind of also dispel the kind of myths. So there's a lot of myths going around about electric cars, and just try and increase awareness and educate of the kind of amount of infrastructure out there, and the kind of the range you can get out of it, and the kind of cost savings you can get from having an electric car. I'll just kind of move on. So we've also got a lot of kind of innovation projects. So we've got our wireless and on-street resident research and development projects. We put 40 million into that. So that's developing kind of innovative and low-cost trials of on-street solutions and wireless solutions as well. I believe this is the funding that was kind of provided to Bishop's Auckland for their kind of on-street innovative technologies. We've also got our vehicle-to-grid funding, which is the idea of a car that kind of being used as a battery and then exporting that power back onto the grid. And again, this we think will greatly help with the grid and kind of reduce that impact of electric cars on reinforcement needs. We've also kind of don't want to forget hydrogen. So we've got our Hydrogen for Transport programme, which is providing funding towards which about 300 hydrogen cars and also kind of a few refueling stations. Hydrogen is kind of a bit earlier stage of development as than electric vehicles, but we kind of see we're kind of monitoring the market and seeing we kind of, as we said, we want it to be kind of industry led, and the kind of industry at the moment is leaning towards electric cars, but we are providing that support towards hydrogen and kind of seeing what happens in that space as well. And then finally, our kind of local and international leadership work. So we provide £40 million towards these kind of Go Ultra Low cities, which is kind of Bristol, York, Oxford, and they're kind of supposed to be our exemplars of kind of ultra low emission vehicles. And a lot of that funding is going towards kind of rapid charge point hubs, on-street charging, and various other kind of innovative kind of projects. We've also got funding towards ultra low emission bus schemes and for dedicated taxi charge points as well. Great, so that's kind of, quite a long overview of all the different incentives that we have, but hopefully that just gives you a bit of an idea of what we're doing and we're going to continue to do to meet our ambitions. And I'm happy to take any questions at the end, or I'll kind of be hanging around as well if anyone wants to ask me anything.